the day I returned. I am an old man now. My hair is white and my hands are weak, but my heart remembers everything. One day I decided to return to my village. It had been many years since I left. I wanted to see it again. The road to the village was long and quiet. I walked slowly, using my stick to help me. The trees were taller than I remembered, and the air smelled fresh. I thought about my childhood as I walked. I thought about my family and friends. When I reached the village, my heart felt heavy. The houses were broken, the streets were empty, the fields where we played were full of weeds. It was not the village I remembered. I stood in the middle of the village and closed my eyes. I could still hear the laughter of children. I could still see my mother cooking in the kitchen. But when I opened my eyes, everything was gone. I walked to the place where my house used to be. The walls were broken, and the roof was gone. I touched the old stones and felt tears in my eyes. This was the house where I was born. It was the house where I grew up. As the sun began to set, I sat on the ground. The village was quiet, but my mind was full of memories. I remembered the good days, the happy times, and I promised myself to never forget them. The next morning, I woke up early. The sun was rising, and the sky was pink and gold. I walked around the village again. Every step I took brought back a memory. I saw the well where we used to gather water. It was dry now, with cracks in the stone. I walked to the school. It was just a small building when I was a boy. Now it was gone. Only the wooden frame remained. I could hear the voice of my old teacher in my head. She always told us to dream big. Her words stayed with me all my life. Nearby, I found the market square. This was once the heart of the village. People sold fruits, vegetables, and handmade things. Now, it was empty. The ground was covered in dirt and leaves. I remembered the sound of laughter and people talking. It felt like those days were a dream. I sat on an old bench and looked at the hills. They were still beautiful, green, and strong. The hills had not changed, but everything else had. I wondered what happened to the people. Where did they go? Did they ever think about the village like I did? As I sat there, a bird landed near me. It was small and white with black spots on its wings. It sang a soft song. For a moment I felt peace. The bird reminded me that life goes on, even when things change. I stayed there until the sun was high in the sky. Then I stood up and kept walking. There was still more to see, more memories to find. My heart felt heavy, but I wanted to remember every part of my village. I walked to the river next. The river was where we spent our summers as children. We swam, laughed, and played games on its banks. Now the water was shallow and slow. The trees around it were dry, their leaves gone. I sat by the edge and looked into the water. My reflection stared back at me, old and tired. I picked up a small stone and threw it into the river. The ripples spread across the surface. It reminded me of the time we skipped stones as kids. My best friend always won. He could skip a stone 5 or 6 times. I smiled at the memory, but it quickly faded. Next, I walked to my family's old house. The roof was gone and the walls were cracked. I stepped inside, and the floor creaked under my feet. I saw the corner where my mother used to sew clothes. Her basket of thread and needles was still there, dusty and forgotten. In the kitchen, I saw the table where we ate our meals. I could almost hear my father's voice telling stories as we ate. My chest felt tight. Those days were gone forever, but they still lived in my heart. I went to the back of the house and saw the tree where my sister and I used to play. We tied a swing to its strongest branch. The swing was gone, but the tree stood tall. I touched its bark and closed my eyes. I could almost hear her laughter. As I stood there, the wind blew gently, carrying the scent of the earth. It reminded me of the good times, but also of how much had been lost. The village was no longer the place I knew. It was a shadow of its past, but it was still my home. I walked to the school where we used to learn and play. The building was still standing, but it looked sad and lonely. The windows were broken and the doors hung open. I stepped inside and saw the empty desks covered in dust. This was where I learned to read and write. I remembered the teacher who believed in me. She always told me, "You can do great things if you work hard." Her words stayed with me all my life. I could still see her smile, her kind eyes full of hope. It was hard to stand there, surrounded by silence. Outside the school, there was a small field. This was where we played games after class. We ran, laughed, and sometimes fought, but we always made up. The field was now overgrown with weeds. It seemed smaller than I remembered, as if the years had taken its strength too. I made my way to the village square. It used to be the heart of our community. The market stalls were gone and the benches were broken. I stood in the middle, imagining the voices of people buying and selling, children running, and old men talking about the past. There was a fountain in the square, but it was dry now. As a child, I would toss coins into the water and make wishes. I wished for happiness, for love, for a good life. Looking at the dry fountain, I wondered if any of those wishes had come true. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The beauty of the sunset felt out of place in this forgotten village. Yet it reminded me that life continues, even in the midst of loss. As the sun dipped lower, I walked to the hill outside the village. From there I could see everything, the houses, the fields, the empty streets. It was quiet, too quiet. I sat on the grass, my hands resting on my knees, and let my thoughts wander. I remembered the festivals we used to have on this hill. People from all over the village came together. We sang songs, danced, and shared food. The air was filled with laughter and joy. Now the hill felt empty, as if it missed those days too. I saw the old windmill in the distance. It used to turn slowly in the wind, its creaking sound a part of our daily lives. Now the blades were broken and it stood still, like a tired giant. It made me think about time and how everything changes, no matter how much we want it to stay the same. The stars began to appear in the sky. I looked up and thought about my family. My parents, my sister, my friends, they were all gone now. I carried their memories, but it wasn't the same. The village was my connection to them, and seeing it like this was heartbreaking. As the night grew darker, I lit a small candle I had brought with me. I placed it on the ground and watched the flame dance in the breeze. It was a small light, but it brought me comfort. It felt like I was honoring the past, the people, and the village that had shaped me. Sitting there, I realized that even though the village was in ruins, it was still part of me. The memories, both happy and sad, were mine to carry. They made me who I am. I took a deep breath, letting the cool night air fill my lungs, and promised myself to never forget. The next morning, I walked through the village one last time. The sunlight touched the broken walls and empty streets, giving them a soft golden glow. It felt as if the village was saying goodbye to me, just as I was saying goodbye to I.E. stood in front of my childhood home. The roof was gone, and the walls were cracked, but I could still imagine it as it was before. I could hear my mother's laughter, smell the bread she baked, and feel the warmth of my father's hugs. These memories brought both pain and peace to my heart. Before leaving, I went to the small well in the center of the village. It was dry now, but when I was a boy, it was the heart of our community. People gathered there every morning, filling their buckets and sharing news. I ran my fingers over the stone edge and whispered a quiet thank you for the water, for the life, and for the memories. I carried a small bag of soil with me as I left. It was from the garden my father had planted many years ago. I wanted to take a part of the village with me, a piece of its soul, so I would never feel too far from home. As I walked away, I turned back one last time. The village looked small from the distance, surrounded by hills and trees. It felt like it was part of the earth, timeless and eternal, even in its silence. I knew I could not change the past, but I could carry its lessons and love with me. The village had taught me strength, kindness, and the value of memories. I closed my eyes, whispered a prayer, and let the tears fall. Though the village was gone, it would live forever in my heart. And as I walked into the future, I carried its spirit with me, knowing it had shaped the person I had become.